Hello, everybody. Welcome to MHTV. We're really fortunate to have a fantastic guest with us tonight. And we're going to be talking about the experience of working through COVID and thinking about self-care and nurses as well. So before we get started and we get introduced to our fantastic guest, let's go to Dave. And Dave, if you can tell us how people can join in and share their experiences or ask questions themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Nicky. Hi, everyone. So as always, we've got a couple of options of how you can join into tonight's episode of MHTV. The first one is on Facebook Live. Obviously, next to the screen where you're watching this episode, just wander to the right and you'll see a panel where you can put in some comments, questions, thoughts, anything that you want to share tonight, then we'd love to read it. And obviously anything appropriate we'll bring into the conversation. The other way is on Twitter. And obviously all you need to do on Twitter is to use the hashtag MHTV. We'll be searching that throughout the episode. And again, anything that's got MHTV on it, we'll bring into the episode tonight. But without further ado, straight back to you, Nicky.
Fantastic. Juan, thank you so much for being with us. So excited. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? But first, can you introduce yourself for anyone who isn't aware of you?
Yeah, hello. My name is Joan Pons Laplana, and as you can see by my accent, this is not a Yorkshire accent, despite me being in Yorkshire for the last 20 years. I was born in Spain a while ago, but one day, 21 years ago, I decided to pack my suitcase and pursue my dream of being a nurse here in the UK. And I've been working as a nurse in England for the last 21 years.
So how did you come into be a nurse then? What was your journey into nursing?
To be honest, it was a bit for luck. I was 17. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad told me that I needed to go to university. That was compulsory, or I needed to find a job. I didn't want to find a job at that point, and I did like physiotherapy. I used to love biology. I was very curious and everything, but at that time also I was very passionate by football. I used to live in Barcelona, that we have, despite anybody say, the best team in the world. If any comments, please be kind to me. Barcelona is the best team, and every Sunday I was going to the stadium, and I used to be very attractive to a little person who, every time that the players got injured, used to come out with a magic little suitcase, and in less than 30 seconds, all the players suddenly stand up, and they were fantastic playing again. And one day, I was sitting there with my dad and say, "Dad, I want to be that person." And later on, I realized that I was a physiotherapist, and I decided I wanted to be a sports physiotherapist. Unfortunately, I did like partying a bit too much, and I did not have the grades to go to the physiotherapy. But I was lucky enough that on my application for university, I put the physiotherapy, and a second option, I put nursing. I didn't know anything about nursing. I need to be honest, and nobody in my family used to have nursing background. But the other option, I wanted to be a paramedic. And in Spain, 21 years ago, to be a paramedic, you needed to be a nurse first. And there I went. I was basically destiny made me to start nursing. And I did completely fall in love during the first years. Also, I need to say that during university, they had the best parties I ever been. Also, they were full of females. I mean, I was the king of the mambo, they say in Spain. I did love the scientific part of nursing, the learning and everything, but also the human side of the nursing. And I decided that I wanted to be an A&E nurse before become a paramedic. At that point, it was ER was one of the biggest series on television, and I thought that I was a bit like George Clooney and say, "Well, let's go to A&E," and I like a bit of action. And I was there. Unfortunately, I finished in 1997. And I tried very hard to find a permanent job. The situation in Spain was not very good. And I did find occasionally work, summers, but never a long contract. And after 3 years, I was a bit fed up, and because I wanted continuity, I wanted to carry on pursuing my dream. And then the only option at that point was to go abroad. And when I was growing up, I always admired England, the United Kingdom. I admired the music, the Beatles. I was growing up with the Pet Mode, the Pet Shop Boys, and everything, and then also the television, the humor. My favorite series was Fawlty Towers. I'm from Barcelona, like Manuel, and the Blackadder, and the Youngsters. That was a fantastic series, and then the fashion and the music. I didn't think more than 5 minutes when one day I saw an advert on a paper that say there's a job in England, please apply. And I did apply. And then I got accepted. And on Bonfire year 2000, I landed in Luton Airport with a suitcase full of dreams and 50 pounds in my pocket. And that was my journey, the start of my journey here in this country. I started working the following Monday in intensive care at the Northern General Hospital in Sheffield.
Wow. That is got to have been quite a culture shock.
It was. I completely underestimated because I thought, well, what can be different between England and Spain? Also, I choose completely the wrong time. If everybody asks me always the question, what will be advice to any nurse from abroad to come to England? What's your best advice? I always say, don't come during the winter months. If you need to come to this country, come from May onwards. Winters, if you're not used to them, they're absolutely dark, rainy. You don't see the sunshine, and it's very difficult to adapt. I was coming from Spain when the culture is that you spend most of the time outside on bars, meeting people at the beach, and basically you only go home to sleep. I came here in November, and there was nobody on the streets. Everybody is at home.
Yeah.
And it took me quite a shock. I always say that we were, because I didn't come alone. There was, I think 12 of us came on a plane from different parts of Spain. And after a year, I was the only one left. I always say that I was the winner of Big Brother before Big Brother was invented.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had a huge amount of experience then working in these really quite acute nursing settings. How have things been different then when we think about kind of your experience during COVID? Because I think a lot of nurses have taken quite a battering in that time.
Yeah, the problem is the intensity of that period, and emotionally also you get involved. The fact that and that you don't have families involved, and also you feel alone. Because I was a senior nurse. I was working in quality improvement. My specialty was the technology, how to make the NHS deliver better care with the help with technology. In a way, to try to bring the NHS to the 21st century that sometimes feels that we're a bit behind. That was my job. When COVID hit the pandemic, all the hospitals, my hospital around the country, they decided to stop the non-essential projects and redeploy nurses like me to the front line. At that point, because I had an ITU background, my first job that I came was in ITU. I decided I volunteered myself to say, "Boy, if I need to go somewhere, can I go to intensive care?" And I underestimated also the impact that will have on my mental health and the heart that is going to be in there. I always thought that I was quite a strong person. I always thought that I was quite resilient, but I was not prepared of the influx of emotions that I have on a daily basis. On the same day, I had anxiety, I had fear, I have happiness suddenly because somebody wake up. I have a lot of horror, angriness, a lot of loneliness. All that, these emotions can go in less than five minutes from one side to another. Also, I was in a place that I was redeployed and I didn't know practically anybody, because Sheffield Teaching Hospital is one of the biggest in the country. We have 17,000 staff. I mean, for me, moving from my little unit, that quality improvement, suddenly to another unit completely different. People, faces and everything, but I didn't meet them. And also, don't forget that I only recognize eyes. And the problem that I have is that I'm not very good with just eyes. And that's what I spent there for the first wave. And also, I did have signs of anxiety and mental fatigue and everything, but I felt that I couldn't do anything about it, and I just keep putting them onto the back of my head and say, oh, you need to carry on. That needs me, because also I felt very proud of what I was doing. It's been one of the proudest moments of my career, but also it's been the hardest because the sense of that we are doing something, making a difference, also come back, because I became a nurse because I wanted to make a difference. So during COVID, I did find this sense of belonging again. That a bit because I'm a overseas nurse. Brexit a bit took me a bit of my identity, and that COVID, in a way, nobody was worried about my accent. Nobody would say anything about where I come from, and suddenly nobody was asking me where you come from. They were very happy to see me, and that sense of belonging that I did lost a couple of years before, it was there, and also I was proud, but I was in denial. And the first time I had an anxiety attack, I didn't do anything, and it was not until I froze. I still remember. I had a very sleepless night. The night before, a patient that was caring for nearly a month passed away alone. I was the only person there. Emotionally, was very very tough because I also was at the first wave. We're still not allowed families to come the last minute. During the second wave and later on during the pandemic, when we learned a bit more, we had access to people who were able to say goodbye. But at that point, I was the person there, and I was there on a conversation with his daughter, who was a similar age to my daughter, say, goodbye, Daddy, I love you a lot. And that words still now make me cry, because I saw that it could be me on that table, that daughter saying goodbye, it could have been me. And that sense of mortality, suddenly it had a big impact on me. The following day, I was driving. I didn't sleep at all. I keep saying the patient died, and that sentence keeps repeating on my head. I started having sweating, palpitations, and I froze. On that double door, when you go to the unit, just before you go to the staff room, I couldn't go. After 5 minutes, I managed to have a deep breath, going in, and I sat on the staff. But the first thing that everybody was doing is to look at each other and ask who is missing today, because obviously as the pandemic was going through, some of my colleagues were catching COVID because I was in the front line, and we were very lucky that in my unit nobody passed away or nobody ended up in intensive care. But all over up and down the country, you will see that. Yeah. And in there, suddenly I didn't pass out, but I went to a completely frozen state. As only when, I don't know how long later, the manager, but the nurse in charge touched my shoulder and say, Joe, are you okay? For the first time in 46 years, I say, no, I don't think I'm okay. And I was lucky that because of COVID, they put a support and they put the access to a psychologist and a counselor, and I went to see the counselor. And I started counseling. But I refused to go off sick. I refused completely to go off sick because, and also refused to admit that I had a mental health problem. Even if I was having counseling and everything, I thought that I'll be fine the following day, and I kept going. And I said, well, if I don't come to work, who will come? That sense of guilt that also I had, the sense of we're so short of staff. If I don't go there, my patient could not receive a care and he may die. That sense of guilt, I never felt it that hard before. It's a sense of duty that I imagine other nurses also will feel, that I could not afford going poorly. Also, because at that point, I did not take mental health as serious as physical health. Say, physically, I was well and everything. Say, mental health, I should be okay the following morning. I wasn't. And I was also very good GP. I have a GP nurse who also was very good. He took me under her wing and prescribed me propranolol in case of I had any more panic attacks. But I did manage, in a way, to complete my thing in intensive care, the first wave. And then at the end of July, I went back to my role as a quality improvement nurse. Then I thought that was it. But then again, it came the second wave. And I had a conversation with my manager from my actual role, and say, Joe, we're going to open again the intensive care, but I don't think you should go there because of your previous history. I completely refuse. Say, I need to go back there. I said, but you mentally, you are going to put in a very difficult position. I said, but if I don't go, who will go? We don't have any more nurses. We have this influx and everything. And looking at now, I shouldn't have gone back to intensive care, but I went because again, I wanted to be there. But the second wave for me was worse of the first one, because at that point also I had anger mixing with everything, because I saw a directly effect of the relaxing the COVID restrictions that happened during Christmas. I saw families in my unit, people a lot younger. I was counting one day, I was there, and I counted the average age of the people during second wave, and their average age, they were younger than me. At that point, I started having nightmares, sleepless nights, waking up, and the mood swings started. I became also paranoid. I became that because I was so tired. I became paranoid. I was going to make a mistake and everything. And despite I started also having therapy and everything, but again, I did refuse to go off sick. I said, you're not going to make me go sick. But very slowly, my therapist was very clever. And the problem I had is I was the inability to offload all these feelings. And that feelings, every time I was into intensive care, they were accumulating, and they were creating a weight onto my shoulders. And that way, at the end, that's the reason, because I was becoming paralyzed. And what the therapist helped me to do is very little to try to offload that. But as a man, I never learned how to do that. I'm not very good at expressing my feelings. And also I come from a culture from Spain that is a macho culture, that when you're at school at my age in the 1970s, if you ask all the boys what they want to do when they're older, everybody will say, boy, I want to be a footballer or matador. That was the stereotypes. And the male dominating culture that the man is to be the breadwinner, I think it was a lot more strong that here in the UK. For that reason, mental health, we don't talk amongst men, and we've seen as a weakness. I also showed that as a weakness. But what the therapist did, because I was my inability of talking about feelings, I created this shield around me, and that shield made me also become more lonely and isolated into myself. Then she tried a lot of therapies, meditation, I couldn't do that, yoga, I couldn't do that, other things, but I found one that it did have a lot of a good effect, that is writing. She made me carry a book, a little book, and it made me every time that you feel something, say, write it down. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter, don't write sentences. If you feel angry, write angry. If you feel sad, write sad. If you feel frustrated, just write it down, offload that feeling. And before to go to bed, read all the feelings that you had that day. And that's how it started. I started offload all these feelings. And then the next step, a couple of weeks later, and say, okay, now every time you put a feeling, try to tell next to it, just very short sentence, why you feel angry. And then I used to write, I feel angry because the Boris Johnson relaxed the rules, or I feel anxious because they don't have my size of PPE today, or I feel frustrated because it seems that the numbers are going down. And that also helped me to express. And then the next step is that I share my diary. One of the things I had problems is with my loved ones, because I wanted them to protect them. I didn't want them to see what I was going through. I was pretending that I was okay also. But that also had a counter effect. I mean, I became a stranger inside my family because of my pain. I became isolated. And then because my fear of my worst fear was for them to bring COVID into my family. I also started living in the spare bedroom, and I mean, all my relationship with my wife went down the pan, my family and everything. I was basically a bit of a Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and at some point, my wife say, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say because I don't know how you're going to respond." My change of character was very quickly, and I was quite I could go ballistic for minimal things that thinking now say that's very I think it makes no sense. But that's when, just before I started these things, the counselor, after that, it told me that I had PTSD. For me, that to say, "Well, that's impossible. I'm a nurse. I'm not a soldier. PTSD is for soldiers. I'm not been in any war. I'm not been anything." And I say, "No." I say the micro crisis that you had and the exposure that you have on a daily basis, the death, the inability to offload your feelings, you sense that you need to carry on despite what, and everything that make that you have developed PTSD. And the problem I had is my anxiety. The triggers for my anxiety was the hospital. The journey from home to the hospital, it was becoming more and more difficult for me. And that leave to the unit, I had nightmares about that leave. And I realized that I needed to do something drastically. Otherwise, I was going to lose everything and my career, my everything. Because my counselor say, "Well, unless you go off sick or you do something, next step, you're already on propranolol, you're already in therapies, you still refuse to go off sick. Unless you go off sick or do something else." They wanted me to start to prescribing antidepressives and other things. And I say, I do something. And then I start running. One of the therapies that my counselor prescribed me is run. Just go for a run. At that point, I was quite overweight because part of my anxiety, the way that calmed my anxiety was eating. I come from a culture that my mom loved to feed me and all sitting around the table and everything. And from my youth, all my happiness experience is always been surrounded by food. And that's why I became also a way of comfort me was food, but my weight ballooning during pandemic. And I ended up at that point that I decided that the only way for me to avoid a completely crisis, a mental meltdown, was to leave nursing and to find another job. I was devastated. I was devastated because nursing is the thing that I've done for 21 years. But I also realized that what my counselors say, look, unless you start caring for yourself and take your mental health seriously, you will end up, quite poorly. And I realized then that I ignored my mental health for 46 years. And if I have done the same with my physical health, I will probably have serious consequences. But that's how happened also with mental health. I realized that there's nothing to be ashamed about my mental health. And the only problem is that I didn't care about my mental health at all for 45 years. And I realized that if I wanted to carry on, I needed to start caring and about my mental health, about myself, and to give the same importance to my mental health that to my physical health. Because I was, every time that I had the headaches or I have any physical problems, I know what to do. I know I need to go to the doctor or I need to take paracetamol or I need to that. Yeah. But for mental health, my instinct reaction is, it will pass, it will pass, it will pass. But if you have pain on your knee and you carry on walking, you don't get better, you get worse. The same with the mental health. And my advice is that I don't want anybody who's watching that to make the same mistake as I do and think that if that will pass, the anxiety, nothing to worry about and everything. You need, the sooner you seek help, the sooner you can offload that, the sooner you can start sharing. It's in the English language, you say, problem share is problem half. That's the sooner then you can become, you can regain the balance. That's the problem. I went so far to the extreme that for me, the only way to regain the balance was to leave completely. And on a moment that we have so many nurses that they're burning out, I think we need to take the stigma out of mental health, and it should be compulsory that every nurse should have access to the counselor in the hospitals and everything, and not to wait till you cannot carry on anymore, because then we lose nurses. If we put something in place and a space for the nurses to offload all these emotions, because nursing is one of the most emotional careers that you can find. You find the people you care for on the worst moment of their life, and you keep absorbing. For 21 years, I absorb all these emotions. And if you don't offload them, you end up like me, just nearly having a completely meltdown and completely a crisis. And I realized that actually seeking help is nothing to be ashamed. It's one of the bravest things you can do. And it's one of the best things I have done. The only thing I'm ashamed is I didn't realize that a lot early as a nurse. I thought that I did know a lot of things. Made me realize that I should have seek help a long time ago. Because looking now, there was signs before COVID. There were signs that I was burning out a couple of 3 years ago before that, and I completely ignored that signs. If I had seek help then,
look at that. I mean, you said so much that's so important. And first of all, just thank you for being so honest, because I think it does make a difference for people to hear it. And you're 100% right when you say there is a shame still, particularly for professionals, particularly for nurses who are supposed to be able to just take anything and do anything, to say that they need help too. And I think it's really important to see nurse leaders like yourself actually standing up and saying, health is just the same, physical health, mental health. When you need help, you need help. So Dave's tweeting out now some of the sort of support things that you can access if this is something that's happening for you. Things like Nurse Lifeline, but even finding someone to talk to at work. And we will obviously look at your experiences, Joe, about how you sort of care for yourself and the advice that you've got. But one thing you keep saying that's so interesting, and I think will really resonate with a lot of nurses, is you're really smart. And if this was happening to anybody else, you would have said, you need to get help right now. And you were saying, like, all the times when you had that trigger, that impulse, or someone said to you, you need to go off sick or you need to take a moment, you were really resistant to it. What do you think that's about? Because I think a lot of nurses.
I think it's a bit of a shame and a stigma that if I thought that if as a leader, because as a senior nurse, I needed to be resilient, I needed to be present, but I confused the word resilience of I needed to be there at any cost, and that cost at the end my mental health. Also, I was in a way in denial that I have mental health problems, because I thought that if I have mental health problems, the people will see me less as a good nurse, or less as a good father, less as a man, because I thought if people know that I have these anxiety problems and all these other problems, they will completely see me that I'm not good to lead anything. And I had this idea that as a leader, any kind of leadership, you needed to show the strength and to be strong. And I say, well, that is completely the wrong approach, because as a leader, I'm human. I'm not a hero. I'm not an angel. I have moments that I'm strong, but I'm also I have moments that I need help like anybody else. But the idea that people know that I was struggling, for me, it was a no-go zone, because I built for a lot of years my image, and I had the idea that I spent months and years trying to get the recognition that I had at that point, and if people suddenly attach mental health to my name, nobody will take me seriously. Nobody will respect me as a nurse or as a man or as a father. That's what I thought. I was completely wrong, because I couldn't be far more wrong, because as soon as I realized that and I started sharing my story, the support has been incredible, and I think it's made me a better person, because I'm more balanced now. I don't pretend that to put a brave face to whatever, despite the situations, and I have bad days like anybody else, and I make decisions that they're hard decisions because my role and everything, and that people need to know that as a senior nurses, we also care for the decisions we made, and they have my decisions. They have an impact not just in my unit. They have impact in all the hospital, and sometimes you feel responsible when when down the line, the frontline nurse, Mary, don't have enough resources to deliver the care that the patient deserve, and that can come back to me on one of my decisions because I decided to move budgets and everything. That affects also as a senior nurse, and I think we need to humanize a bit more the NHS, and we need to take the stigma. Not the stigma. You need to take the image of nursing and doctors are heroes. We're not heroes. We're not heroes. We're human beings, but we are highly qualified, with highly knowledge, and with highly competence. And we constantly making decisions that save people's life. But we have also a human side, and sometimes we need a bit of caring for ourselves. And I realized that caring for yourself is not selfish. It's the most selfless thing that you can do. Because unless you care for yourself, then you cannot give good care to anybody else. Because on that situation I was, I think looking at now, I think I was dangerous going to work on the mental state I had, because I could have made a lot of mistakes. Luckily, I wasn't. I did not. Luckily, I had a very good team, and I was in intensive care that is one-to-one care. I mean, in a way, it's a bit more control. But I don't know what will have happened if I had gone to a war with 15 or 20 patients. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's interesting what you're saying as well, this pressure. So there's the pressure of like the image that we have, the pressure we put on ourselves, and it's all sort of jumbled up together. Before we go any further, though, I can see some questions have come in. So I'm going to go over to Dave. Dave, do you want to pass some questions over for one?
Yeah, thanks, Nicky. We've had quite a few comments in. Joe Masters, really interested in your story. You're articulating your experience so well. The way nurses feel guilt and take on crazy levels of responsibility. So I'm sure there'll be lots of people watching tonight that kind of feel that, experience that day in, day out. And I suppose your story kind of highlights really strongly about why it's important to take that time to think about how that impacts you and the kind of steps that you can take sometimes to improve that. We've had Victory say hello. So hello. Simone's given a comment a bit off topic tonight, but we'll put a response in the text. And then Alfonso's put in a few comments. Don't you think it's also the employer's responsibility to preserve staff's well-being? So I don't know if you just want to share a few thoughts on that, and then maybe I can give a bit of an extra sort of answer as well from a union side.
I do, and I think that it's been neglected. Mental health has been neglected among the workforce, but hopefully that changed, because I see a lot of initiative now from NHS England that they're putting a lot of more resources, and nurses and frontline have more access to helplines, and also a lot of hospitals. They have also hired counselors that they can access a lot more quicker, because I don't think it's acceptable that at the moment to access to a mental health help, some people are waiting 6 months. And I don't think that's acceptable. I think that's part of the problem, because the longer you wait, is what I said before, the weight keeps accumulating. The longer you have this weight on your shoulders, the more difficult it is to offload it. If you have, it's like anything. The quicker you put something in place, the prevention of burnout start from the first moment that even you. I think that it should be compulsory on every team meeting, every monthly team meeting, to have a counselor in that team meeting and have counseling sessions for nurses to go. Even if they go there and they don't have anything to say, then we need to remove that stigma and make it more as a natural way to offload things that is happened. We live on people dying day in, day out, and a lot of people, on their trouble. Also, is a profession of both the extremes, because also we have a lot of happy memories of a lot of patients that they recover and they go back to the situation. But we go very quickly to the next patient, because the workloads are so hard now and so intense nowadays. We can go from a happy moment with a patient to the next minute to a sad moment to another patient, and the next minute to another one, and that kind of mental pressure, it takes a toll onto your brain and everything. And unless we learn to offload, we then If not, we became what I say, more of a like a machine. I still remember when I finished my education, and one of the first time I went to the war, I still remember the matron. They were matrons at that. Well, they're matron now, but they're not the same. The matron. It was one day that I had a fight with my girlfriend, and I went to the unit. I was a bit sad and everything. And the first thing, Nurse Pons, please, you leave all your feelings as you go through the door. And I say, yes, matron. And then 10 years later, I say, well, I don't want to be that nurse. I don't want to be a robot. I don't want to be a nurse who don't feel anything. That's what they asked me to do. Because I think nursing also needs to have empathy and compassion and everything. And it changed a lot in the last few years. But when you get involved, that every patient, for me, takes a bit of your soul. Every patient who get discharged home on a positive note also takes a bit of you with them. People who die also takes a bit of you, a piece of your heart with them. Mm-hmm. And unless you replay and recover from all these pieces that they keep taking out of you, you end up completely lost and you don't know how to carry on. That self-care is important. And other countries, for example, if we look Nordic countries and everything, they have mental health days. People can phone and say, I don't feel well today, I'm taking a mental health day. And they're on the top of your annual leave. They don't count as a sick days, they count as a mental health days. And I think we should learn from that countries and maybe to put something similar in here. Because at some point during your year that you are working, you will have days that you need a bit of me time. And if you do that, we may prevent a lot of burnout. We may prevent a lot of nurses going long-term sick.
You've actually answered another question without being asked it, so well done. You're on form tonight, saying what's the one thing employers should do, and I guess that's right. Dave?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about sort of some of the stuff you said and the kind of the things that we've done on previous MHTV episodes, and I think some of them kind of come together really nicely. So I've tweeted out a link to the previous episode that we did with a couple of colleagues that started Nurse Lifeline, and I know you mentioned that before, Nicky. That's a charity that they've set up that has the option for nurses, midwives, nursing assistants to be able to phone up and get support. And obviously that's a really important place. Just a comment that Tam's put on, I think employers have a duty to take care of their employees' well-being, to retain staff, but most times they don't due to various reasons. The union should be able to represent the employee's voice when necessary. And if it's not living to the expectations, then maybe we need to look into what needs to change to make things better. And certainly, there should be kind of things that are in place that supports good work on this. Just thinking about things like the NHS staff survey for organisations that, NHS organisations, that should give a really good insight into the health, including the mental health of staff. And good employers will look at that and say, well, actually, we're obviously not doing so well in this element this year. What steps can we take to make this better? There's other things out there. So we've had an episode on the professional nurse advocates that we did with Emma Wadey a while back. And obviously those kind of mechanisms where people can be supported, trained to do that work. And also we've reported in the past in the journal on the mental health, what's it called? Mental health first aid. I know some universities have trained students in mental health first aid, not only for supporting each other, but for supporting people when they go out into the workforce. One of the questions I had for you, Nicky, was, I suppose, do you think that mental health nurses are better at this than adult, child and learning disability nurses?
No, I think there's something exactly as I was saying, there's something in the identity of nursing which is partly pushed on us and partly that we create ourselves. That means that we hold ourselves to standards which are inhuman. And the advice that we would give to other people, the way that we look after other people, we don't take that understanding and that understanding of what it means to be a well human, we don't bring that to ourselves. In fact, if anything, some people get a bit of pride out of not doing it, like being tougher, not needing to go to the loo, not needing to take a break, not needing to ask for help. Yeah. And we as nurses who've been in the game a while need to really say, don't do that. It's a mistake. It's not right. And the same thing, you see it with humor as well, when being a nurse is a source of great joy and hilarity.
Yeah.
But it's about not punching down. And sometimes when you see that sarcastic, that angry humor, it's really masking a lot of pain that nursing can bring to you as well. And I think that we need to be much more on the lookout for signs that somebody isn't doing as well as they might, and actually being generous and gentle and compassionate with each other, the way that we try to be for service users and patients. And particularly, we need to do a lot better job of looking after our baby nurses, our students, our junior colleagues, and being better role models to them, I think. Because I know the lessons that I've got in my head came from the senior nurses above me, who barely seemed human at all, in some ways. They never seemed to get upset. They never seemed to feel sad. They never seemed to make mistakes. And it's really hard to know how to thrive and learn and grow if you never see any problems. Alfonso's written down here as well, talking about what you were saying, Joanne, about the importance of offloading. And sometimes it's really difficult to offload because it feels like you're bringing another problem into an area where there's already loads of problems. And he's talked as well about cultural and organizational issues where we don't prioritize our health. And again, the idea when you were saying, you didn't have the parity of esteem, you didn't value mental health in the same way because you hadn't had to that point. We're saying it's just not high on the agenda for people. Joselina Cato, hello, Joselina, said that she thinks mental health nurses have a better understanding as compared to children and mental health nurses. I think they have a better understanding, but I don't think necessarily we have a better understanding into ourselves. But I might be wrong. I mean, everyone's different, aren't they?
I suppose one of the reasons I asked that question, Nicky, was kind of a loaded question in a way. Is I was at a university back in the day when I went to universities and kind of had a chat with some of the student mental health nurses, and a couple of them were describing the problems that they were having with their own mental health. And actually kind of the really poor response they'd had from their universities, which was obviously stacked with mental health nurses that were now lecturers. And it's that it's really sad to hear that message, isn't it? That, you would expect that the support and the care that they should receive would be the best in the country. But obviously, the description that they gave certainly wasn't, which was a real shame.
Definitely. Yeah. John, you were going to say something. We interrupted you. What was it?
Yeah, it's just also, I think that's a call for universities. When I studied nursing, I had a lot of emphasis on anatomy, biology, pharmacology, chemistry, and everything. But I don't remember anything about how to take care of your mental health. There was no subject for 3 years. Then we never talk about how a nurse can take care of a mental health and how can they do if they struggle. And for me, that needs to change. It needs to be put in the curriculum that self-care and also mental health should be a compulsory curriculum as important as biology, as knowing all the bones or as knowing all the pharmacs and contraindications should be as important and at that. Hopefully that changed, but I'm talking about 20 years ago when I was a student, that there was non-existent mental health inside the university. There was not a subject. And I say, now looking at this, that was, I think, is a big mistake.
It is a bit different now that it is in the curriculum. The problem is the curriculum is very task focused, and whilst there's supposed to be parity of care, it's like the more you have of one field of nursing, they just end up dominating without meaning to sometimes. So there's a big adult focus, in my opinion, and when we are losing maybe space in the curriculum that needs to go to mental and emotional well-being, particularly for nurses to identify their own issues. So I think you made a really interesting point there. We've gone on for ages again, as ever. Every day we do this. We always think, right, we're going to keep to time. We're not to time. But if you had some opportunity to say, from your experience, because everyone's experience is different, but what have you learned about self-care and nursing? What would you maybe like to pass on?
Yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed to having a wobble or to having a bit of anxiety or having a bad day at work. Everybody can have that. The important thing is to seek help. I think is one of the bravest things. And don't keep these feelings, that bad feelings to yourself. Share them. your friends, or if you don't want to share them with friends, go to a counselor. I found it a lot easier with a counselor. For some extent reason, I rather confine my mental health problems to a stranger than not to my loved ones. But I'm learning. Please don't keep it to yourself. The best things and the bravest things that anybody can do is to seek help.
Yeah. Dave, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Just to say, absolutely. And obviously, in terms of union membership, there are places to get support. There's obviously the impact that mental health has on you as a person, but also on your ability to work. And if you do feel like, you're not able to work, if you feel like there's problems with you being able to work safely, then do talk to your local workplace reps. I know as a health and safety rep, when I was in the NHS, having conversations with colleagues that were feeling sort of great distress and supporting them to look after themselves, but also to make sure that they weren't making those mistakes in the workplace that, that could store up bigger problems later on. So, those kind of really important steps to take, it's absolutely key. I think the other thing is, just sort of hopefully there is lots of work going on in this area, like you said already. We're going to report on some of it in the next Mental Health Nursing Journal, but there's meetings coming up to kind of further the work that's been happening over the last couple of years because of the sort of previous research that showed the disproportionately high number of especially female nurses that were contemplating or sort of self-harm and suicide. And obviously, there are steps being taken to support people in workplaces, but we know that often that progress is too slow. So, don't wait for people to sort of bring in new things. Make sure you use the things that are available already.
Absolutely. Rui's just managed to get in under the wire with the last question there. Better paying conditions would be the greatest aid to nurses' mental health. I think anyone would turn those down. But also, we realise this is just the tip of the iceberg, and everyone has loads of different experience around this. We've tweeted out some more links to Joan's work and his writing, and if that's something that you find really helpful, I would suggest you do follow up and have a look at that. But also, if tonight you've heard something that's made you feel uncomfortable or worried for a colleague, please reach out to them. And if it's a situation that you find is something that really resonates with you, you're valuable, and precious. And please treat yourself with the care and compassion that you do the people who you work with. Don't wait. Ask for some support if you can have some. So thank you very much for tonight. And most of all, thank you, Joan, for being so open and talking about something that a lot of people find so difficult still. It's really appreciated.
That helped at least one person. That for me, that's why I'm doing it.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to everybody. And I guess wish you good night. Do something nice for yourself tonight. Take care. Bye-bye.
Night.
Bye.